Dear friends, chers amis, today I'm honored to be given the valuable opportunity to address, albeit remotely, such a diverse and eminent group of business leaders, decision makers, commentators, and I want warmly to thank both Gilles and Nicolas Remillard for inviting me to contribute to such an ambitious forum. Answering the question we face today, which is how to revive the global economy, undoubtedly represents a challenge, given the uncertainty, the frustration, sufferance caused by the resurgence of the pandemic across many countries. It is natural for some people to aspire to a kind of prompt return back to yesterday as normal. However, today we are not simply asked to imagine how to restore the pre-pandemic world. Today we are expected to design a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable future. To date, the virus has already taken more than 1.5 million lives, and hundreds of millions more have been dramatically affected by exacerbated poverty, massive unemployment, disrupted education for the youngsters, and we have to acknowledge it, the infringement upon our personal freedoms, which we suffer from. By the end of this unfortunate year, which is now ending, the pandemics will have caused a global recession of some 4.2%, according to the latest OECD estimates, and is projected to wipe out some $28 trillion in output over the next 5 years, according to the IMF. Assuming that renewed virus outbreaks remain contained and that the prospects of widely available and fully operational vaccine, in which I believe by the end of 2021 will contribute to reboost confidence, the OECD expects that a gradual, but we know that uneven recovery in the global economy will occur in the next 2 years, with global GDP projected to rise by 4.2% in 2021 and a further 3.7% in 2022. Overall, by the end of 2021, total GDP would be narrow to what it was in the pre-crisis levels, mainly sustained by China's strong recovery, but performance would differ markedly across the main economies, US, Europe, and all over the world. As an example, the output is projected to remain around 5% below pre-crisis expectations in many developed countries in 2022, raising the risk of substantial and permanent costs from the pandemic. In response to the pandemic's economic turmoil, the world's largest economies have already committed over $12 trillion in fiscal spending for coronavirus recovery, and they are right to do so. Redundancies have been blocked in some countries, while others have put in place reinforced unemployment benefits scheme, fully restoring the lost income. It's the case almost everywhere in Europe, and especially in my country, France. Furthermore, extraordinary monetary policy actions have maintained the flow of credit, helping millions of firms to stay in business and taking the risk out of the credit institutions. As governments will proceed making new investments, synchronization among countries will prove a key factor of success, and if it does not exist, then we will fail. Strong evidence, including dismal memories from the clumsy, highly coordinated policy responses to the 2008 financial crisis, suggests that if G20 countries acted alone, separately, rather than acting together, it would take about 2/3 more spending to achieve the same outcome. That's why we must really move collectively and in a coordinated approach. In the past, we have been united in diversity. Now it's time to stay united in adversity. This can pave the way to a preliminary foundation or refoundation for recovery, but it does not suffice for progress. We should not overlook the even greater challenges lying ahead, and particularly the asymmetric nature of the crisis, which is poised to dramatically aggravate inequalities both within and among countries. And this is a major challenge for the politicians and political actors. First, lockdowns and restrictive measures entail much greater hardship for people involved in jobs that could not be performed from home. And this is a massive source of inequality. White-collar jobs, especially knowledge-intensive ones, already were increasingly well rewarded relatively to manual jobs in terms of pay, of job security, predictability, and the pandemic has put it on display. Workers in most manual service jobs, hospitality, tourism, delivery, retail, basic care, culture, requiring physical proximity were more exposed to either lockdowns, when deemed as non-essential, but work is always essential, or contagion when essential for fighting the virus. Moreover, women and the young were hit particularly hard because they are overrepresented in many of these particular sectors, as documented in the IMF's latest World Economic Outlook. On top of that, while women are doing some 15 more hours a week of unpaid housework, and we must have that in mind, than men in several advanced economies, those unlucky enough to graduate and start careers in a recession may experience lower earnings for no less than 10 to 15 years after graduating, if not longer. Second, shutting down the schools had a massive impact on children, on their career prospects. The World Bank indicates how COVID-19 related school closures risk pushing an additional 72 million primary schools-aged children into what is called learning poverty, meaning that they are unable to read and to understand a simple text by the age of 10. The pandemic is amplifying the global learning crisis that already existed before. It could increase the percentage of primary school-age children in low and middle income countries living in learning poverty from 53% to 63%. And it puts the generation of students at risk of losing about $10 trillion in future lifetime earnings, an amount equivalent to around 10% of global GDP. For all these reasons, I do believe that it is not an exaggeration to affirm that this crisis jeopardizes the hard-fought results achieved throughout the last decades in terms of gender equality and generational mobility in developed countries, while condemning an entire generation, especially in the developing world, to lose itself and permanently lag behind. And frankly speaking, we cannot let that happen. It is morally unacceptable and politically deadly if we want to fight populism and illiberal democracy. That is why we cannot and should not merely go back to normal, to a world characterized by stagnating growth, low productivity, increasing inequality, and irreversible environmental deterioration. This is not the world we need to build now. We have a moral obligation to envisage clearly a different future, which realization will depend on how we will tackle two major compelling challenges: fighting the worst global economic crisis since the Great Depression of 1929, no less than that. And second, seizing the opportunity offered by the crisis to question the status quo and to build up a greener, more inclusive, more dynamic world for the future generations, cornered around an economy within everyone's reach. How to build such an economy? Although there is, I truly believe that no one-size-fits-all recipe, I'm convinced that work must be central, because it is where many of the long-lasting and pandemic-related economic challenges intersect. Inequality, precarity, the new informality of jobs, geographic disparities, technical change, all are related to jobs. Reforms have to focus on creating higher quality jobs for more people in more places, as my good friend, the IMF's MD, Kristalina Georgia, defined them in people-focused policies. These, by investing in women, in young people, and by enhancing education, training, reskilling to open up opportunities, can boost productivity, especially if investments clearly foster the abilities of workers in informal or low-skill sectors. Moreover, governments should adopt economic policies that tackle climate change by both modifying the composition of energy, high versus low emission sources, and affecting total energy consumptions. Pairing carbon taxes that render dirty fuels more expensive with policies that mitigate the impact on consumers' energy costs, such as subsidies or direct public investment in green energy, would, in my view, put in place an all-embracing green infrastructure capable of delivering rapid emission reductions without major negative impact on output and unemployment. This green infrastructure would have a dual function, in my view. First, boosting global GDP and employment in the initial years of the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. And second, while enhancing productivity in low-carbon sectors, thereby incentivizing the private sector to invest in them and making it easier to adapt the higher carbon prices. There is a good momentum for that as well in Europe, with the fact that we have, at last, really adopted a recovery plan in the European Council a few days ago, and also in the US with the new Biden administration, which is a major hope, I think, for all of us to return there to a kind of political and democratic normal. In conclusion, creativity, determination, fairness will have to assist us navigating through these rough seas. I'm firmly convinced that elaborating, exchanging, processing ideas in forums such as this one can provide us with the appropriate compass to ultimately reach a kind of a promised land. Since we're in Montreal, which is basically still a place where a lot of people speak French, and being French myself, I want to quote the French poet Paul Valéry. And he said, "Le vent se lève, il faut tenter de vivre." I will translate that for those who are not fully fluent in French. The wind is rising. We must try to live. I'm confident you will be able to make the world profit from this fruitful exchange. I wish you a very interesting and productive Montreal conference. I hope that we will have the occasion to meet anew in presence very soon in this country I like, in Canada, in Quebec. Thank you very much for your attention.